Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I've been asked to give you an update on Novell Filr and, well, not an update, but just talk about Novell Filr to you, and we can talk about where we're going with Novell Filr a little bit at the end if you'd like. So Filr is a solution that allows you to use your mobile device to access your existing files, but before we get to that, let's just spend a few minutes to talk about, how we ended up where we are today. Novell pioneered networking infrastructure, the sharing of disks and printers over 30 years ago, and this was, and to some extent still is today, a very complex solution to implement and manage. As a result of that, we've traditionally viewed IT as the guardians of this technology. Those of you who've been around for a long time, you remember the early days of comm surfing drives and feeding disks and so on. Thankfully, some of those things have gone away, and it is a little bit easier today to manage the file system, but it is still something that, one, we don't want our traditional end users to do just because of the complexity associated to it, but also somebody has to stand back and say, this is appropriate or this is not appropriate. And like I said, that role has traditionally fallen on the shoulders of IT to determine what is going on and what should be allowed. To the end users who simply want to get their jobs done, that can be a little bit restrictive. They can feel, as the diagram illustrates, handcuffed by this. When they want to share a file with their coworkers, they have to call the help desk. They can't just do it on their own, and that has created a certain amount of friction between those two groups. As a result, users turn to alternate methods to share files amongst each other, whether it's floppy disks that we all used to use at one point in time, email, or more recently things like USB flash drives. So there have always been ways around what IT has put in place for us when it comes to sharing and accessing files. But a couple things have changed even more dramatically recently, and the first one is these mobile devices, smartphones and so on. In a lot of cases, these devices are in fact brought into the organization by the end users. And in the early days of these, it was traditionally an executive of some sort who simply comes in, buys the latest gadget because it's exciting and hot, and then asks IT to make it work. That always creates a challenge. But now that these devices are becoming more and more ubiquitous, as well as high-speed internet, this has opened the door for people wanting to use these for more than just email, and that is to do their work. And the biggest challenge or barrier that people always find with that is how do they access their files. With the advent of these high-speed and super reliable internet, solutions such as Dropbox, Box, Sugar, Copy, Bitcasa, Google Drive, etc. have sprung up all over the place, giving end users the ability to do this on their own and not needing IT anymore. The challenge is that those documents are now no longer under IT's control, which may or may not be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. But what that means is which cloud service are you using versus the other person that you're sharing with, which is the latest version of that file and which cloud service is it. Some people have more than one that they're using and so on. And then from, again, that guardianship of the information, IT has a big concern, as does your CSO, your security officer, probably your CEO, and even your marketing people about what happens when that information either becomes unavailable and or compromised. How do you explain to somebody that you've lost all of their confidential information because a cloud service that you were using was hacked? Down here at the bottom, for instance, for those of you in the US, you're very familiar with HIPAA and so on. There was a hospital that was fined because they put patient data into a cloud service. So then the question becomes, if you have these mobile devices and these ambitious users who love to use those devices, how can you connect those devices to a secure and reliable storage of or document repository? And that's where Novell Filr comes in. It is a solution that was from the ground up designed specifically to do that. So to look at what Filr is and what it does for you, you have all of your existing storage, whether it's a Novell-based storage platform, either NetWare or Open Enterprise Server, whether it's a Microsoft Windows platform or maybe just a NAS storage platform. Basically, any kind of files that you might have, unstructured data that you might have inside of your environment, you can now make available to these mobile devices as well as a variety of new and untraditional devices. Users that are mobile and just have access to a browser, they're at an internet cafe or something like that. What's an easy way for them to get access to their files? And again, Novell Filr is the solution for that. So Filr is a software appliance. It's a virtual appliance that you can install inside of your environment. We support VMware, Microsoft Hyper-V, and Xen, XEN hypervisors, and you can deploy Filr on top of those. Through Filr, through the open protocols that Filr supports, things like HTTPS, REST, and WebDAV, these devices can now communicate and connect to the existing file system. We will connect to all the existing authentication sources that you have inside of your environment, whether it's eDirectory, Active Directory, multiple eDirectories, or multiple Active Directories, so that when these users come in with these devices and want to access the files, we actually respect all of the existing access controls. If I log in through Filr, I will only see the files that I actually have rights to on the file system itself. It's not something that there's a risk of exposing files to somebody that maybe doesn't have the right rights or something like that. If the rights are set on the file system, and in most cases that's something that everybody's been doing for 20 or 30 years on the file system itself, those rights can be reused and applied towards the mobile file access. Now, Filr provides a couple of additional features on top of just simply file sharing and file access, and that is the ability to share. So you do not need to email a file to anyone. You don't need to put it onto a USB key. What you can simply do is share a URL and share that link with somebody so that they can now get access to that. You, of course, now don't want to manage yet another identity within your system, so we support having these external users that your people might be sharing files with, creating their own accounts or using something like OpenID to authenticate. And as they do so, we have an internal database in Filr that we store all of that information in. Now, the ability to share is very convenient, but it is done under IT's watchful eye. You have to enable, IT has to enable the ability for users to be able to share files in the first place, and they can also control who they share files with. Is it just internal users, or are external users allowed as well? Additionally, can you make a document public so that no one even needs to identify themselves? So there are some controls in place to kind of manage what users have access to and what they're allowed to do within Filr. One of the other things that Filr does for your users, whether they're mobile users, browser-based users, etc., is the ability to full-text search all of your content. Filr has to go out and determine the rights and information about those files, the metadata for those files anyways, so that it makes the appropriate files available to the appropriate people when they're coming in through, one of these remote devices. But as it's doing that, there is an option for you to also full-text index all of those files. So Filr can now provide your users the ability to quickly locate files, and just simply based on the contents of those files. Another exciting feature that, that Filr provides for you is the ability to get email notifications when a file has changed. So if you're working with a team of users and collaborating on certain documents, you don't have to go and ask, did you update the file, or go and log in and check to see if the file has been updated and see what changes are there. You'll actually get an email, and if you check the box, you'll get an email with the document attached saying, here's the latest version, so that you always have the updates and the status of what's going on with those files. Now, there is one more thing that Filr is doing in the very near future. A lot of people have implemented Microsoft SharePoint as a collaboration tool for files. So in the next release of Filr coming out in the first half of this year, we'll also support a connection to SharePoint. So alongside the existing files that you may see on your network, you'll also see files that reside in a SharePoint repository. So with that, rather than going through some slides, I actually have a demo here. So if you just bear with me for a second. And of course, well, that's unfortunate. So somehow it seems WebEx is interfering with my screen share. That's okay. We'll just continue on with the slides in that case. The slides have lots of screenshots and examples specifically for this purpose. I do have an iPad here, and I normally am able to project my iPad onto my computer screen so that you can actually follow me along and see what I'm doing within the Filr app and a live connected Filr system, but we'll just do it this way. All right, so what we have here is the actual, it's an actual screenshot. This happens to be an iPad screenshot of the Filr mobile application. What you see is my files, which happens to be the files that are sitting in your home directory on the server itself. So this is your personal files, you know, your F drive or your H drive or something like that on the network. The net folders that you see on the opposite side, that is all of your map drives, your network shares, and so on. As you access files on either your My Files or your net folders, you'll get this recently used file list that populates automatically, so that as you access files, it gets listed there, and you can quickly go back to that if you're working on a file and need to update it or something like that. You don't have to go browsing for it and retrieve that file. In the center here, what you see is Shared With Me, and Shared With Me are the files that internal users have shared with you. Again, for those of you who are more technical on the call here, when you're granting rights to somebody on the file system itself, those are explicit rights, and that's what that group of users that you grant those to have rights to the file system. If you then wish other people to have access on the traditional file system, IT, the help desk, whatever, has to go in and add more people to that list. With Filr, we actually have a proxy user which will go in and grant rights on behalf of IT to those other users. So that proxy user, it's in the background, it's something that's managed automatically, but if you give people rights, they can just simply click on the file and say share and give other people rights to that without needing to call the help desk every time. Again, that may be a security issue. It's up to you how you deal with that, if you want to enable it or not. But if you do, even if it's personal files out of the user's home directories, they can share those files with other people without needing to email them around or call the help desk and ask for rights and so on. You have some other things here, what's new. So this is an activity stream of what's going on within Filr. When you click on that, you'll see all the files that have been updated in a chronological order. So if you want to see if, you know, what's going on, who's uploading files and so on, what's new will show you that. Shared by me are the files that I have shared with other people. I can go in and share files if I'm given rights to all over the place in different directories, different folders, and so on. So I don't want to have to go back to every single file location that I might have possibly shared from. By just simply clicking on shared by me, I can see all the files that I've turned around and shared with other people. This gives me the ability to manage that. So if I've changed my mind and I don't want to have somebody have access anymore because maybe they've left the organization abruptly or something like that, or although that's a bad example because their access would be terminated anyways, but for whatever reason I want to manage that, I can simply click on shared by me. I'll see all the files and folders that I've shared. I can add more people, I can take people off, and so on. Being a mobile device, I may be disconnected from time to time if I'm on a plane or out of Wi-Fi range or out of network range or something like that. And this download tab, this downloads button that you see in the middle, lets me actually download certain files to my device and take them with me offline so that I can review them, update them, etc. And when I do reconnect, all of those will be automatically updated. And then the search is exactly what it does. It's that search functionality that lets me full text search for new files on the network. So here is another screenshot showing you a little bit more detail. I've drilled into the My Files, so this is my home directory on the network. I've clicked on the Filr architecture presentation, and on the right-hand side, it actually renders that document for me using the built-in viewing technology of the iOS application or the iOS operating system. And of course, we have the same app available on Android devices as well as BlackBerry 10 devices, and you get the same capabilities there. If the operating system, iOS in this case, cannot render that file, we will actually present a message to the user saying we're unable to generate a preview, but if you click here, we'll do that for you on the server. And what will happen is the Filr appliance has built-in Stellent viewers. For those of you who are familiar with GroupWise, it's the same viewing technology that we have in GroupWise. It will render that file for me and deliver an HTML version or a view of that in its place. So that allows me to still view the file, again, even though I don't actually have or have opened the file inside of an application or something like that. Some of the other things that we see here is that little X up there, which also is that little download or that little green button next to the file, and that means this file has been downloaded to my device. So as I mentioned before, this file is available to me offline and can be accessed without being logged into or without being connected to the network and the Filr appliance itself. Up here we have an open-in, and in Android it is called Share With, and what that will do is take this file and open it into another application on my, my device. And that application could be for the purposes of editing the file. It could be, in this case, a PDF for the purposes of marking up the file, highlighting it, underlining, those kinds of things, commenting on it. Or it could be another one of our mobile solutions called iPrint that lets me open this document and actually print it from my mobile device. The X in the corner will simply clear this view. So again, it's previewed this file. If I don't want to see this anymore or I find it distracting, I can X that and that will clear it. This arrow will simply make this full screen, so I can actually view the file full screen and I can present it to someone if I wanted to. And then down here at the bottom, the number 4, if I swipe up, we also have a built-in commenting capability that allows me to collaborate with people and comment on documents, again, without needing to email them back and forth and so on. So the comments are now tied directly to the files and we can collaborate that way as we move forward. Here we have, this happens to be the net folder if you look up in the upper left corner. So this is my map drive. In this case it's sales, and I can go down and I'll see exactly the same style of interface, but I'm looking at a map drive the same way I did my home directory. These files are actually coming from the server. When I click on a file like I did here or in the previous example, this document is cached on my device. If I simply click off and go to another document, or I clear that by clicking on the X in the corner, it will remove that document from cache. But otherwise, that master document, the document itself, is still residing on my server, back in my office, managed by IT. Here is the shared with me. You can see that at the bottom and up at the top as well. So these are all the files and folders that I have shared with other people. And if I click on the exclamation mark next to it, I can actually manage those shares, add more people, remove people, set expiry dates, and so on. And here you can see what happens. Again, you click on the exclamation mark. I can add more people to the share. I can add external people if I'm allowed to. I can define whether they are a contributor to this, so that means they can add more files, or if they view only. So they can consume the information, they can see what I'm working on, they can leave comments, but they can't actually modify the source document. I also have some actions. I can rename a file, I can move a file, delete a file, and so on. And here, just simply showing I've added an external, I've added another user, and this time the access is view, so same idea. This happens to be a search, so I've gone in and I've searched for MWV, and this document, because it contains those 3 initials, that acronym comes up as part of the search results. Filr also has a web interface. As I mentioned before, you might be mobile or a remote user. You might not have a smart device with you, iOS or Android device or BlackBerry 10 device, or maybe your batteries are dead and you have to resort to something else. So using a browser interface, you get a similar look and feel that you do on the iOS in terms of my files shared with me, shared by me in your net folders. And you can, again, access exactly the same files. Here is, that little number 4. It's the same number 4 that you've seen previously in the iOS, and that is the comments that are associated to this particular document. Something else to draw your attention to here is the background up here. This is custom branding. So on the web interface, we support a very easy custom branding capability where you can upload your graphics, your logos, you can upload your colors or set your colors, and so on. the administrator can do that. It's not something that everyone can do, but the administrator can basically customize the look and feel of the Filr web interface and give you that capability. Now, for the mobile application, we actually have a custom branding capability as well. It's a little bit more complicated, and it does require that we create a custom app for you and publish it into the App Store. So it's, again, very much more complicated, but it can be done, and if you're interested in something like that, you can contact either myself or your local rep, and we can walk you through getting that done. But like I said, it is significantly more complicated than the web interface that you see here, where you can just go to the menu, say branding, and upload your branding. Here is, again, on the web interface, the sharing capabilities that you have. Just to back up for a second, that is accessed through the down arrow that you see right there. A little menu will pop up, and one of the options will be share. When you select that, you can pick, using name completion, your internal users, or you can also just put in an email address for an external user. And then you have some options here in terms of what rights do the user have. I mentioned before the view versus being able to edit. On a single file, it is editor, but on a folder, it is a contributor, which means you can not only modify the existing files in that folder, but you can also add or contribute more files. So that's the difference there. And then when you share, you have some options: internal users, external users, public, and those are options that have been granted to me by the administrator in this example, but it could be just I have internal sharing rights and not anything else. Again, that's definable by the IT organization, by your security constraints that you live under, whatever you want to do there. Whether or not you enable that is up to you. And then you also have some options on the expiry of that share. You can make it indefinite, so everybody has access for as long as that Filr system exists and your account exists on that system. But you can also put an expiry on certain days, or you can put an expiry after X amount of days. So if you know that there's a project going on and maybe this is a contractor that's there for the next 30 days, you can share something with them and set an expiry after. If the contract is 30 days, set it after 31 days. You don't have to think about what day is that or something like that. Just 31 days and it's done, and their access is revoked automatically after that time. These are the comments that I had mentioned previously. So clicking on that little bubble brings up this commenting dialog. And here you can see the comments from the various people. So they can be just straight, or you can actually reply to certain comments, as you can see Eric Clapton did. So you actually get threaded discussions happening here with regards to people commenting on these files. And again, this is available in the mobile application. It would look the same way. All I do is swipe up from the bottom, and I'll get a dialog and shows me exactly the same thing. Here is an advanced search capability, and in this case, I knew that there was a document out there that contained the word Patrick, and when I do the search, I get the Beaverbrook success story, and down here at the bottom is Patrick Walker, IT Director at Beaverbrooks, who has commented in this particular success story. So you're searching not only the metadata associated to the document, so the document name and so on, but it's also searching inside the documents themselves. All right, there is actually one more thing. So let me go back to my demo here. Make this a bit bigger. So this is the browser interface again. This is a live demo system that I have, but we also have an agent that is available for Windows as well as Macintosh, the Windows and the OS X operating system. And using the Filr console or the agent that sits on your computer, you can select which folders you want to synchronize to your computer, and so on, as well as set your name and the location of those files. And then what happens is it will automatically populate your favorites as well as your libraries with a Novell Filr entry, and then depending on which files you've opted to download, you get the My Files, and again, there's all those same files that we saw. This is the same demo, my user Amanda Cox, and I can actually see all of those same files on my computer. So this synchronizes those files with me. It is similar to the iFolder technology that some of you might be familiar with from our NetWare or Open Enterprise server. There are some differences in terms of the capabilities, but it does allow me to synchronize those files and take them with me if I were to disconnect and get onto a plane or something like that, or be in an area without connectivity. I have copies of those files. I can make changes. I can use them. I can give presentations, whatever I want to do or need to do. And then if anything has changed either locally or on the server, when I reconnect, it will synchronize those files back. So here is the net folders. So I can actually choose to synchronize, map drives or network shares to my computer, as well as the files that other people have shared with me. If I scroll down here, so my demo system, I'm actually demoing this off of a Windows server, which doubles as kind of my workstation. So you have to kind of use your imagination a little bit, but here is my Amanda Cox. This H drive is my home directory, and again, right there is all those exact same files. If I bring up my browser again, Cox. So you can see, those files are coming directly off of the server and simply appear to me inside of Filr. As I make changes and synchronize those changes, upload those changes, depending on which interface that I'm using, those files will be reflected, and I'll always only have one copy of that file available to me on my mobile device, iOS, Android, or BlackBerry 10, through a browser, or offline using Windows or Mac OS X. And Amy, do we have any questions at this point in time? It's unfortunate that I couldn't get my tablet to show up, but I'm hoping that people have understood and gotten the idea.
Yeah, we do actually have a couple of questions right now, but again, if anyone does have any additional questions, you can put them through on the chat or the Q&A. The first question, what is the advantage of having Filr integrate with SharePoint?
Well, there's a couple of advantages there. The first one is Microsoft doesn't really provide a good mobile solution for SharePoint. And the second one is that, again, using a single interface, you will have access to all of your files, whether they're sitting on your file server or residing inside of SharePoint. So it's, again, a single application, a single web interface that you would use, and it gives you access to both environments at the same time.
Okay. The other question I'm seeing, can I edit files on my iPad using Apple Pages that I can access from my Filr iPad application?
And yes, the answer to that is yes. That was one of the things that I had hoped to show, but basically using, let me go back to my screenshot here. Using this open-in capability that you have native in iOS and it's share with in Android, what you will do is take this document and choose the application in which you want to open in. So you can pick pages. I was going to use Docs to Go on my tablet, but whatever your editor of choice is, you can make your changes, and then from that application you would select Open In and pick Filr to save that file to. That way you've taken it from Filr, made your changes, opened it in your editor of choice, and then you save it back into Filr, which of course saves it directly back to the network and makes it available to anybody else that has access to that on the network, either because it's a map drive or a shared directory on the network, or because you're using the Filr sharing capabilities with other people.
Okay. Does Filr come with the NOWS product, or is it a separate license, and how is it licensed?
Okay. So Filr is part of Open Enterprise Server, and Open Enterprise Server is part of NOWS. So anyone who has license is licensed for Open Enterprise Server is automatically licensed for Filr. So it is included as part of that as a free entitlement to Open Enterprise Server. And for other non-Open Enterprise Server customers, if you're a Windows customer or something like that, then there is several pricing options that are available. It is licensed on a per-user basis. You can buy a perpetual license and own that license, or you can also buy a subscription, and it's an annual subscription that comes with not only support but also updates as well. And then it doesn't matter how many devices you use to access it. On the back end, we support anything that we can make an NCP or a SIPS connection, and if that user has one mobile device or they have 7, it doesn't matter. It's just per user that's accessing the information through Filr.
All right. It looks like we have just a few more questions right now. Have you found what the limit is for syncing lots of data, such as 10 gigabytes to the client?
Yep. So there is there's a lot of information that needs to be kept track of as you're synchronizing files and so on. So to be perfectly honest, in the 1.0 client that shipped originally, there were some issues with large amounts of files or large files on your local device synchronizing back to the server. We are currently in beta with a version 1.02 client, which does a significantly better job of that, and it's in beta right now. If anybody wants that or needs access to that, please send me an email. I will make my presentation available to Amy afterwards, and it will be available to you tomorrow, or it's right there on the screen. We will get you that client if you have, say, 10 gigabytes of data, because in the original client, to be perfectly honest, that would not have worked. But like I said, we have addressed that in this latest version of the client and made that simpler to use. We will also come out later on this year. It'll be in line with the 1.1 release. It won't ship with 1.1, but it'll be at around the same time on yet another client. And that client, what we are working on there is what we call a merged view. So that even though you may not have synchronized all of your files down to your local computer, it will appear as though they're all there. So you can use that client to access, not only the files that are local on your computer, but also the files on the network. It kind of overlays, the original network shares and map drives, as well as your My Files, on top of the files that have synchronized down, so it looks like everything's there, but some files are not synced, saving you disk space on your local device, as well as freeing up performance.
Okay, the next question, how does Filr interact with Office 365 or Google Apps for Education?
So those solutions are cloud-based storage, and Filr, the whole premise for Filr is that it accesses, let me just move ahead here, your local files. So if you're already in the cloud, that's not what Filr is about. Filr is about accessing your files that reside in your data center on your servers.
Okay, are there any plans to integrate Filr to open in and save without opening with option?
That is something that we are, wait, can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yes, are there any plans to integrate Filr to open in and save without opening with option?
Okay, well, there's a couple of different things there. I'm not entirely sure which direction or where that question is coming from, but I'll give you a couple of different answers here. The first one is in the browser, which is not open in, I realize that, but in the browser, there is an edit button that is associated to the files. And you have the ability to edit in place so that you don't need to download that file, make your changes, and then upload it. It will simply open the file and let you edit it and save it back to the server, and that is using the WebDAV interface that you see here. On the iOS application, there is something that Google has done. Well, it's not actually Google that has done it. They've simply acquired the company that did it, and the application, I believe, is called I can tell you here in a second, but what that application has done is something similar to a WebDAV type capability, where it remembers where the file came from and will let you save it back into that file location. So we have been talking about looking at that API to see if we can do it, but unfortunately that API is particular to that application, and the application is called QuickOffice. So QuickOffice has this capability, and QuickOffice was acquired by Google, but no other application on iOS actually has that ability to kind of save back. And that is actually, it's not a limitation on our part or on the app vendor's part. It's actually something that Apple has put into iOS, where it containerizes all of the applications. All applications on iOS have their own data store built into it as part of the security that that Apple has built into that. So unless Google turns around and licenses that save back capability to anyone else, and or Apple opens up the applications to allow them to actually interact with one another and the file system, there's no real way to do that on iOS, unfortunately.
Okay, and the last question I'm seeing at this point, is there a timeline, is there a tentative timeline for integration with SharePoint?
Yep, that is our 1.1 release, and we're looking at well, right now we're looking at early summer, but we are going to go into beta shortly, and we're hopeful that the feedback from our beta sites is such that we can, in fact, get it out the door earlier. We are code complete at this point in time for all intents and purposes on Filr 1.1, but we need to get feedback on it, and like I said, we're about to go into beta with that. So it's right now where the project plan says early summer, kind of June, July, but if we get good feedback and don't have you know, a lot of things to clean up between now and then, we will try to get that out sooner.